Hi everybody and welcome to a special Kalicube Tuesdays. I'm Jason Barnard, the brand SERP guy from Kalicube. I'm here with Olga Zarr. Welcome, Olga.
Hi, Jason. I am very happy to be here. As always, being your guest is the biggest honor. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing absolutely fine. And today we're going to be talking about a technical SEO masterclass because we had a discussion about Noindex. We didn't agree, and I suddenly realized that I don't know as much about technical SEO as I thought I did. So we'll start with the song anyway. A quick hello and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Olga Zarr.
That's awesome. If I knew how to sing, I would be happy to sing back, but I won't try because you will lose your audience.
Right. Okay. So you can run, I can sing. You're a huge runner.
Yeah. Maybe
Well, I
not that
can't run.
huge now as I used to be, but I'm still running. So SEO kind of has taken over, and I think it has become a bigger passion even than
Oh,
running
wow.
recently. Yeah, something kind of changed.
Oh, wow. I heard that running sets off some drugs in your brain that make you addicted.
Yeah. That's why I needed to be able to work productively and be a good SEO. But it's not that
Ah,
I run just for the sake of running to be faster.
right. Okay. So
Yeah.
we're going to talk
Aside with
about the
running.
addiction to SEO now, because SEO does something to your brain that makes you
Oh
addicted and
yeah.
makes you wake up in the morning thinking, I really want to do this. You have that SEO addiction, and so do I. And
Totally.
today it's technical SEO, and I'm hugely interested because I looked at the list of questions. You sent me 22 questions, and I don't know the answers to a lot of them. So I'm glad you're here. And we're going to start off with crawling and indexing, because Fabrice Canel from Bing, who is Mr. Bingbot, told me he's hugely frustrated that people say crawling and indexing. For him, there is discover, select, crawl, render, index.
So
So
we
there's
have
5 stages.
five stages, yeah. And can you briefly talk about each one? And maybe I
Yeah,
will chime in if I have something useful to say.
right. Okay. None of this is my own work. It's all Fabrice Canal, and I'm hopefully going to get it right. Basically, discover is how easy is the page to discover. And it comes down to if there are no inbound links, it's never going to get found. Inbound in terms of, inbound
Yeah.
or internal. The more links there are, the more probability is it will to be discovered. So links there are hugely important. Next is select. Does Bingbot or Googlebot select a page? And that doesn't mean, does it say, oh, I like this page? It's even before the crawl moment. It looks at the link to the page and it tries to decide, is the page behind this link worth crawling? And
That's
that's
an
their,
interesting one.
yeah, and he was saying what they were doing was saying, we want to avoid even crawling spam. So we now have algorithms that figure out the probability of behind this link, it's going to be spam.
Yeah. That's super interesting. And is it only for Bing, or do you think Google does the same thing? Because honestly, I don't know.
I would be very, very surprised if Google don't do the same thing, because Fabrice's point was it's a huge waste of resources and a huge cost to the
Yeah,
company
totally.
crawling spam. So the more you can reduce even going to the spam pages or the pages that are thin content or the pages that are duplicate content, the more you save on resources and therefore money. And they're both commercial enterprises, so saving money is huge. And he was saying, what was it, 70 billion pages a day that they've never seen before they discover every single day. 70 billion pages they've never seen before. So they can't realistically or cost effectively crawl all 70 billion. They exclude, I don't know how many, let's say half, by guessing what's behind or saying we'll do that later.
Yeah, that
So
makes sense.
that selection is both getting in, even being crawled, but also when you will be crawled and how often you will be crawled. Then the crawling is obviously how easy is it to crawl the page? How easy is it to get the content? Is the server slow? Is it JavaScript delivered? Is there robots.txt blocking it? Is there no index, which we'll talk about later? The ease of crawling is hugely important to them in terms, once again, of resources. So if you think about the entire discover, select, crawl, render, index process, what they're trying to do is save money And Fabrice himself says, try and reduce the digital footprint, sorry, the carbon footprint of Microsoft on the planet.
Totally.
And that's a huge thing for Fabrice, and he's building the bot, and I would imagine Google are working down the same lines as well.
Yeah, I think so.
And then rendering, can it render? Does it render? I think I heard once from Google is that they will collect the page, and if there's lots of JavaScript, they won't render it. They will tag it for coming back and crawling again later and rendering later. I'm not sure how true that is. 2 steps, is that true?
Yeah, that's true. But recently, I think there were some tests done, and very often this time span between Google reads the HTML and rendered HTML, sometimes it is even a matter of seconds. But if the site is like super complicated, sometimes the kind of the span between the two may be a bit longer. That's why it is usually a good idea to have at least the basic SEO information both in the source code and in the rendered code, because things may change after rendering, and sometimes Google may rank you just based on what's in the source code, and in the rendered there may be new things, other things. Tags may change, title tags may change, so that's why it is usually a good practice to keep them the same, similar.
Right. Okay. So you can't rely on Google rendering systematically, or Bingbot for that matter.
You can, but you have to be careful. At least check what your site looks like after rendering. Compare the rendered code with the source code. Make sure that this is consistent.
Okay, and this really does come down to not just talking about crawling and indexing, but remembering that there are 5 stages: discover, select, crawl, render, and index. And once you break it down into that, you know what you need to focus on, and you know what you're looking for. To discover, you need those links. To select, you need those links to make sense and to encourage the bot to come to this page. To crawl, you need to make sure it's easy or possible even for the bot to crawl it. For rendering, that it can render and you don't rely on rendering in terms of your SEO, at least in the short term. And then index. And this is the one that I think is the most important from my perspective. Obviously, once you've had the page found, discovered, selected, crawled, and rendered, then the real work starts. And Bingbot and Googlebot then take the content of the page and try to guess all of the different roles of the different parts of the page, what they mean, what they contain, and then annotate it. They annotate each and every part of the page. And Gary Ilyash was talking about, think about your page as a set of folders. And Fabrice Canal says, we just break it into chunks and then annotate each chunk, saying, this is what we think is in there. And this is the confidence we have in our annotation. So you need to look at it from that perspective, is break your page down into all the different chunks. Microsoft actually call them chunks. That makes sense, that can stand alone and be analyzed alone. Help the machine to analyze it using semantic HTML5, using simple page structure, make sure the content is clear, because what it will then do is say, well, we think this is the heading. We think this is the paragraph after the heading, and that this is the subheading with the paragraph after it. And we think the content is about topic, or the keywords associated with are this, that, and the other. And our confidence is 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%. And the other teams at Microsoft told me, without Fabrice annotating with a confidence level, they simply will not pick the content out. So what they all do is they look at the annotation and they say, okay, that's a good candidate for the current query, the current need. I will use that, and I will prioritize them according to the confidence that's been applied. So if your content doesn't have, or the chunk of your content doesn't have the annotation that corresponds to the search intent of the query, you won't even get selected. And Gary Ilyash in Kiev a couple of years ago said, it's all well and good thinking about NLP. It's all well and good thinking about mum, but if the word isn't in the page, you're unlikely to even get selected to be analyzed with the NLP and the mum. So
totally.
These annotations, I think for me, or I know for me, are the foundation. That's the key. Once you've got the page into the machine, make sure it can annotate accurately and with confidence, because that's your key to getting into the algorithms that might then rank you.
Yeah, totally. And I would actually like to add stage 6 to that, which is ranking. And sometimes people think that, for example, crawling means indexing, and indexing means ranking. I'm just like now shortening these three phases. And it is important to know that one doesn't equal another. It is not guaranteed that you will be indexed after crawling. There are so many instances of pages which are stuck in Google Search Console in crawled, currently not indexed. And there is a similar situation in Bing Webmaster Tools as well. And a ton of course, obviously a ton of pages which are indexed but not ranked, which is kind of the goal of our job.
Yes.
So that's
100%.
Something I think, which is important.
Well, what's just occurred to me there, which is really obvious now I think about it, and everybody else probably already knew this, is there are multiple stages where the page can be rejected.
Yeah.
And to get to the stage where it's actually indexed is actually relatively complicated. Have you got any particular hints and tips and tricks for pages that are crawled but currently not indexed?
Usually this requires a more in-depth analysis. Very often it is a matter of quality. If your pages, the pages I have been auditing, which had that problem, in most cases those pages were simply thin, short. They weren't bringing anything new to the table. Kind of looked like thin content, and this is mostly the case. Of course, not always, but in many cases. I think this is where helpful content, EEAT, those types of things are becoming more and more important, especially in light of AI tools, which are now generating tons of content for us, which is good, kind of okay. When you look at it, like at first sight, it looks okay. So like the level of entry has become way lower, and that's why I think this quality is something that will become even more and more important.
Which is potentially something they will then do, is if they believe that the page has been generated by AI or the content has been generated by AI, they just put it to one side and say, well, we don't really want this because we can do that ourselves. And I think that's perhaps what people don't really think about, is that if you're going to generate text using AI and give it to Google and hope Google will rank it and present it, why wouldn't Google just do that themselves and generate their own text from the AI?
Yeah, that makes sense. But on the other hand, since ChatGPT became so popular, I have been creating a lot of sites purely on using ChatGPT. And to be honest, some of them are ranking very well. But of course, that doesn't mean it won't change. I don't think that Google will be punishing the fact that you are using AI content, but still, if you proofread it, I think Google even said that they are okay with AI content, but you have to proofread it. You have to make sure that it actually makes sense, that there are no hallucinations. And if you can add some touch of human experience to that, you should be okay in most cases. But I still think that quality will have to be better and better with time.
Yeah, quality is always going to win in the long run. But we're off topic now.
But I just wanted to say something about Bing and Bing Webmaster Tools. So I've been doing some testing on how Bing indexes pages and how Google. I have some observations. I would say that Bing in general is more restrictive, and it is easier for you to get stuck in Bing at those early phases. Even in the case of my site, I think like 3 years ago, I put it out there. Google indexed it like right away, and in Bing I couldn't get it to index. I had to reach out to them like personally, and then they said that I am I am breaking some of their rules. I didn't even really know what those rules were. But for example, in Bing Webmaster Tools, you have this site scan feature, which allows you simply to run a scan, and then Bing Webmaster Tools will tell you that, for example, you have meta description that's too long, you have title that's too short, things that we would things that we sometimes ignore, thinking that they are not that important, but those things may actually contribute to you having a problem with Bing. So usually it's a good idea to go through them and fix the ones that you can easily fix without like spending 100 hours on them. So in that respect, I think Bing is interesting, and generally the entire Bing Webmaster Tools is a very, very interesting tool that has a lot of capabilities, and I recommend anyone to use both GSC and Bing Webmaster Tools because there's a lot of nice technical stuff there.
Right, brilliant. Well, that's my weekend out of the window then. So we're now moving on to the next question.
Yeah,
Question 7 in our list is it enough or a good idea to block a site in robots.txt to prevent indexation? Sorry.
Okay, so I many years ago, I think like 13 years ago, I put up a Polish SEO blog, and I was like writing about SEO, thinking that I know something about SEO at that time. And I recently stumbled upon a post where I wrote that to block indexation, you have to block a page in robots.txt. And then I thought, Jesus, did I really write that? So no, it is not enough. You definitely have to have a noindex tag, because if you block the site, the page in robots, you simply prevent it from being crawled. But if it is prevented from being crawled, it doesn't mean it won't get indexed. If there are links from other places on the internet, it may get indexed. And then you will have this very, very ugly snippet in search results, which says something like blocked in robots takes something like that, which looks very ugly. You basically don't get your snippet. So that's an important distinction to make. And I think it leads us to the next question, something that we briefly discussed last time, which is it enough to block does noindex tag always work, and how to make sure that Google doesn't index a site?
Yeah, and my take was that I have seen multiple circumstances where I've no indexed a page and it has still appeared, and my reading of that was that Google just makes its own mind up, and that's just a kindly suggestion on my part.
And how did you determine whether the page was indexed?
It was ranking.
Okay, so if it was ranking, then totally. But there can be a situation where you have a page and you decide to no index it for some reason, and you block it both in robots.txt and and you add a no index tag. Right. And if you do that, then Google will not be able to see the no index tag and won't remove it from search results.
Aha.
That's a possibility, yeah.
Yes, it is. I mean, and once again, I mean, as we discussed, it might just be that I wasn't paying attention properly, and I was a young and over-enthusiastic SEO. Actually, young, it was only 5 years ago, but there you go. And I wasn't really paying that much attention, so I was just thinking, oh, and then I just did a removal request and got rid of it from the index anyway.
But there are also other cases, like even recently, I think I added canonical tag to a different page because I was running into some cannibalization. I did it like, I don't know, a few days ago. Then I did a test in GSC, and it was showing me that the site is indexable. And then I realized that this was Cloudflare. I didn't flash Cloudflare, and even though I thought I added this, it wasn't really like live. So that's a minor thing, but can also like make you think that you did something while you actually didn't. And one more thing, yeah.
No, and then Cloudflare adds an extra layer of complexity in terms of you have to remember that that's out there and it's caching all these files.
Yeah, go ahead. Totally. And one more case, if you check if your site or a given page is indexed using site : command, it is very likely that you will see some pages there which aren't indexed, because this is like kind of an external tool for you to see whether Google knows those pages, but not necessarily those pages have to be indexed. So that's also something that can mislead you into thinking that the page is indexed while it isn't, or it isn't ranked, SERPed anywhere but your site colon command.
Right. Yeah. And on the topic of no index, I was talking to Yoast Develop years and years ago, and Yoast plugin used to no index the login page.
Yeah.
But that's a huge problem for rich site links on brand SERPs.
Totally.
Because people want to access the login page. And I talked to him about it and he said, oh, you're right. But they were doing it for security reasons. And it's really important to remember that these pages need to be indexed because the people
are
your
searching
users,
for them. Yeah.
But even potentially your privacy policy in terms of EEAT, if you want to prove that you're a legitimate business who respects GDPR, having Google read your privacy policy isn't a bad idea.
Yeah, and there are, again, I heard about tests where it actually makes a difference if you have like a brand new site, whether you put privacy policy there and make it indexable or not. It can make difference to your site. So I totally agree with everything you said.
Oh, hooray, we agree. We didn't agree on no index, but we do agree on no index today. So next question is how to check or compare the rendered HTML versus the source code. I don't even understand the question, so I probably won't understand the answer.
I think you do. You are just being humble. But okay.
Or being silly, or both.
I don't think so. Okay, so the source code is everything you have like in the source code, something that the way you want, simply the code of your site. And the rendered HTML is the code, the HTML after JavaScript has been rendered. And there are always like differences because in the source code you don't have those scripts rendered. In the rendered you do, so there are always like changes. But this is a matter of what changes are made and how important they are, how serious they are. Because if, for example, in the source code you have a no index tag and in the rendered you don't have it, then it may really confuse Google and you may end up with Google doing not what you exactly desired it to do.
Right. Yeah, I think I heard of somebody using Google Tag Manager to no index pages, and the problem that they had was that Google would see index and then it would change to no index.
Yeah. So, and talking about comparing, there are a lot of tools that can allow you to do that. One being Jet Octopus, or for example, Screaming Frog. You simply run a crawl and check that you want to render JavaScript, and then after the crawl is done, you can compare side by side both source and rendered. And even in Screaming Frog, you can also see screenshots of the rendered HTML, so you can easily see if some things are missed.
Right. Oh, cool. I use Screaming Frog, but I've never done that. And another question about rendering.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you're going to say something about Screaming Frog.
I just wanted to say, but be careful with those because this is not exactly how Google sees. Screaming Frog can show you something that Google does not necessarily see it this way. That's why it's good to use Google tools, which is you can simply use the mobile-friendly test, which is going away. But mobile-friendly test allows you to see the rendered screenshot and the rendered HTML of a given page. Once it's gone, I think you will be able to use rich results test. I think it does the same. It allows you to see the screenshot and the rendered HTML, so you can do that comparison and be sure that this is how Google sees your site.
Ooh, brilliant, wonderful. Next on to sitemaps.
Yeah.
Are they important?
So I would say they are important, but it depends, as always, what type of site you have. If you have a very small site which has like a couple of 100 pages, in most cases it doesn't really matter if you have a sitemap or if you don't. It is a good practice, and usually this is not a problem to create one automatically, so it's always good to have one. But if you have a huge site and the site isn't well interlinked, you don't have internal linking set up properly, it may be difficult for Google to discover all of your pages. And as a result, those pages may not get crawled or indexed. If you have like a super, super huge site And for example, there are problems in your sitemap. For example, you have all the URLs in your sitemap are redirected, or you have incorrect URLs, 404s, stuff like that. If it is like a super huge site, like millions of pages, you may run into crawl budget issues at some point, because Google may be crawling those things that it shouldn't be actually crawling. So small sites, nothing super important. Big sites, this is important.
Yeah, and big sites, a great sitemap is going to be hugely helpful, and a bad sitemap that's inaccurate is going to be hugely damaging even.
Yeah, totally. And for example, one thing I recently learned about sitemaps, Google is ignoring the priority and frequency change. I think those two parameters. But Bing, I'm not sure what's their official stance on that, but Bing actually kind of takes that into account. And if you have priority set to like 50% on a site, on a couple of pages in Bing, you may actually struggle with those pages. So usually it is good to have priority set to 100 for all pages in Bing to make sure they get crawled and indexed.
Wow. Okay. Ooh, jolly good. And what about all those errors reports we get in GSC and SEMrush? I mean, one thing I've seen is that clients come and they say, well, I've got all these errors. And if you sort them out, the client's really happy. But does it really make a difference?
Yeah. So in most cases, it doesn't really make a difference. Like even recently, my client forwarded a GSC message he got, even though I got it too. And the message was, I think there are indexing issues, something like that. And this was about one page that we removed, which now is returning 404. And this was done on purpose. But it may look scary. Your site has indexing issues. What's going to happen? And this is when it is important for SEOs to use their critical mind to assess those, because those reports, you cannot follow those reports, those warnings blindly, because there is always be something that you have to take into account: the scope, the severity of a given issue. SEMrush is very good at sending a lot of those warnings, which can really stress you out. But I have seen pages, sites that rank very well and have like 20% okay score in SEMrush, and I have seen sites that have 100% and they rank for nothing. So this is like an extra thing you can do, a technical check. Sometimes it may help you find some things that you wouldn't find manually, but always you have to like analyze it and use your human brain, because at least now AI won't be enough for you to make an informed decision based on those warnings you get.
Yeah, I find those warnings a little bit frustrating, especially faced with clients, and trying to explain to them actually that isn't really very important. We should be focusing on something different.
This is such a scary email, but you shouldn't care how to explain it.
All right, next, what is site speed a thing? Core Web Vitals a thing? Everyone got overexcited about it a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think like 2 years ago, it was like a huge thing. I was also one of the people who were obsessing about this, creating checklist audits. I really learned a ton about Core Web Vitals back then. But I don't think there is a study, and I haven't seen that in my experience as well, that proves that Core Web Vitals can actually help you rank. They don't really matter. I think this was mostly done for the purposes of Google saving maybe money crawling, because everyone was now about making their sites faster, which is okay. But I don't think when it comes to like purely ranking, it has any impact. Of course, you cannot go overboard and have a site that loads in 2 minutes. I saw examples like that. But as long as it's kind of okay, it loads. I don't think you have to like go crazy about the layout shifts or something else. That's like your first paint is like 0.1 seconds too low, too slow. Right. It doesn't really matter. I wouldn't recommend spending like a week or 2 weeks with your devs trying to fix artificial score for example, in Google page speed insights, because you also have this artificial lab score in addition to Core Web Vitals. Definitely a better idea to spend that time creating new content or optimizing the existing content. The ROI will definitely be higher on that.
Yeah, I think that's something we often lose sight of, is where is the return on investment, and Core Web Vitals and site speed are not necessarily going to be the best one. Although on an e-commerce site, site speed or page speed is going to be hugely important because you're going to convert more. So there's a balance to be made. Once again, you use your sensible brain. I think it was Duda who said that they have, I can't remember how many hundreds of thousands of websites, millions maybe of websites. They really got the Core Web Vitals down to a T, and from my memory they said it didn't actually make any difference.
Oh, okay. I haven't heard this one. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we had a couple of webinars with them, and they said, you know, we are the best of all the platforms, better than Wix, better than WordPress. They were very, very happy. And then they said, but at the end of the day, it didn't actually make a difference.
Just good PR for them.
Great PR, because they've just got some more 2 years later.
Yeah.
Now, Goose Egg SEO, I've never, ever heard of that. I know what goose eggs are, and I know what SEO is, but I don't know what they are when you put them together.
Yeah, I heard that like recently. I learned about this. I learned about this on SEO Fight Club channel when there's Ted who is working, who has a lot of experience in e-commerce site, e-commerce SEO. And the thing he shared is that if you have an e-commerce site, for example, a new client, and this client has, let's say, 100,000 pages, and half of those pages don't get any traffic, like zero traffic on a monthly, daily basis. And if you just make sure that each of those pages gets 1 click per day or per month, you are going to add so much traffic by just doing that. And very often it is quite easy to get a page to get 1 click. It is very often just a matter of improving titles, especially in e-commerce. You can very often achieve a ton with just small basic SEO fundamentals, because in most cases there are fundamentals that are missing, like as I said, internal linking, titles. You can change a few things and have those goose eggs work for you and actually make a ton of difference in terms of traffic, even though we are just adding 1 visit in GSC per day.
So the goose egg idea is simply saying with this massive pages, 1 click per month is going to add up to quite a significant amount of traffic.
Totally.
Brilliant. Oh, I like that. That's a nice new concept that I haven't heard of. Small technical fixes sometimes make no difference at all, and sometimes completely change the game for a site. Can you give us a couple of examples of technical fixes that have completely changed the game? Because that's what everyone's looking for.
Yeah, so I was once reviewing a very massive, very huge lawyer website. Maybe not that huge. It had like a couple of thousand of posts, blog posts. And the problem with that site was that all those category pages, if I remember correctly, on top of being no indexed, all the links, all the internal links to blog posts, all the links were going through read more. And the only thing we did, we made sure that the title of the post is actually the link, and that all the categories are indexable, crawlable, and it made like almost overnight, like such a huge difference in traffic. So this was very simple, like 1 small change in the code made by developer, and the site is now has got a new life, I would say.
Brilliant. And that thing about read more, or it's something I'm always very tempted to do, because as a human being, I've just read the bit before, I see read more and I think, all right, I'll click on that link, but it doesn't help search engines. And when you look at what Fabrice talks about is selection, is read more isn't a very good anchor text for being selected. It might well just ignore it. And another problem we had at one point was in rich site links. We ended up with read more as being the blue link in the rich site links on our brand SERP, because we'd linked to one of the pages with read more.
Okay, yeah. And I'm not sure if you remember that I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, if you typed click here into Google, you would see Adobe website, because this is how people used to link to that in the like very, very old times. And but
no,
of
those good
course.
old stories from years and years and years ago. I mean, another story which isn't actually technical SEO, it's Amazon, is I think it was Kevin Indig who pointed this out, is up until I think it was 2 years ago, their meta title on the homepage was cheap books, hi-fis, and videos.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, they suddenly realized that the homepage is actually for branding, and they changed it to pay less, smile more, Amazon. And it's taken them 25 years to figure out that the homepage of the website is actually for branding.
Yeah, totally. And regarding Amazon, very often people think that, I heard at least a lot of people say that, okay, so if Amazon is ranking for those queries products, I don't stand a chance of ranking. And I don't think it's true. Very often, if you maybe Amazon, of course, is a huge brand, but specific URLs for specific products very often have 0 backlinks and are not optimized that well. And very often you can, with little on-page optimization, you can actually take them over.
Oh, right. Yeah, I did a talk a week ago. I mean, 100% agree. And I did a talk a week ago, and one of the screenshots was, it's not just where you show up, it's how you show up.
Yeah, totally.
And that's the idea of I took a screenshot of a result for buy red shoes, and it's got Zalando and Amazon, and they're just the most boring results you can possibly imagine. And then one site slightly further down, which was really interesting, he's saying, well, other than the branding, I'm going to click on the one that's the most interesting, that actually shows me their brand, shows me some personality, and makes me want to do business with them.
Yeah, and this is where rich results become very useful. And maybe since we have touched upon that, maybe you can share a bit of your knowledge regarding Schema, because I know I know Schema the way I should know it, but I'm pretty sure you know way more. So can you tell me how we can effectively implement Schema to improve ourselves in SERPs? Is it enough if I have rank math do Schema for me, or do I need something more? I guess I do.
Right. Yeah, well, there are 2 things that you need to look at. Number one is things like Rank Math and Yoast and WordLift with their FAQ markup are designed to take advantage of the features that Google are offering. And Google are offering these features like the stars, the yellow stars, or the accordion menus, and images as well is something that they're offering up, and they're trying to include what you're including in your schema. That's the carrot to get you to include Schema, because you can then go to your boss and say, look, we got these stars, look, we got these accordions, look, we got this image. That's all thanks to Schema. So these tools are often designed just to serve that purpose, to drive those rich snippets, those rich elements. And for that, absolutely fine, absolutely no problem at all. They're exactly what you need. But then there's a second level of Schema markup, which is reiterating what's in the page in Google's native language. And Schema markup is Google and Bing's native language. So what you're doing with the Schema markup is identifying explicitly the important aspects of the page, so that the machine, once it's read the page, understood the page, can properly, and we come back to Fabrice Cannell's indexing and annotations, it can properly index and annotate it with confidence, because you've explicitly provided it with confirmation of what it already understood in Schema markup. So on a wider scale, Schema markup also serves that, which is to build confidence in understanding for the annotation, which will help you get ahead of the queue in the indexing, being pulled up into the ranking systems. And the third, I only said 2, but I've just thought of a third one as I was talking, is what WordLift does. Is build an internal knowledge graph using Schema markup to connect all the pieces together. This page contains that, which links to this, which is published by that, which has this as the author, and it builds an understanding, a knowledge graph, which you can then transfer to Google as understanding. So there are 3 levels of Schema markup, and it depends how ambitious you want to be. Impress your boss with the rich snippets, rank math, and a lot of other simple tools, click and set up and you're fine. Then there's can I reassure the machine, build its confidence in its understanding on what it's seen on the page? That's stage 2. Stage 3 is, can I build an internal knowledge graph that I can then transfer to these machines so that they can understand the entirety of my website and how it all fits together?
So stage 2 is, I think, exactly what you did for my website, right? So
yes,
because you're helping me help Google understand my new name, and I think it has started to work.
That's a really good distinction. Sorry to cut in
yeah,
there, but
totally.
Kalicube does stage 2 just on the entity home, the about page for you. And that's why we work with the word lift a lot, because what we do is that stage 2, let's make sure it understands your about page, and then word lift takes it on from there and builds the entire knowledge graph. And it works, as you've seen.
Yeah, totally.
Super. That was my schema excitation moment. And as you can see, I'm jumping up and down like this.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, totally. You're the best person to talk about schema and knowledge panels for sure.
I had Jarno van Dreel on the show a few weeks ago. He's actually the #1 top best person on schema markup. He's astonishing.
I think the two of you are.
Thank you very much. That's very, very kind. I'm flattered. Now, can we come back to the question 15?
Yeah, sure.
How can we leverage the use of canonical tags to improve our SEO?
So one thing about canonicals that has changed some time ago, I don't remember exactly. Canonicals are treated by Google as hints, which means Google may use it or may not use it, and when we have to be aware of that. I think on my blog recently, I have also been trying on fight canonicalization. This is even something different to what I mentioned before. And this time Google was able to see that canonical for some time, but still Google didn't listen and was still ranking both pages, the canonicalized one and the one which was the main one. So in some cases it won't work. And in those cases, you may simply want to merge the two pages and redirect the one that you are merging, for example. Another thing regarding canonical, maybe you have something about canonical?
No, I was going to move on to duplicate content, but you've got something else to say about canonical, so we'll finish that and then go on to duplicate.
Yeah, so basically be aware that this is a hint, not a directive.
Right.
And maybe one more thing just popped in my mind. If you want to check what Google thinks is the canonical page of your site, you have to inspect it, use the inspect tool, inspect URL in Google Search Console, and then it will tell you that user selected canonical or Google chose different canonical than user. So this is something that I recommend doing if you are not sure whether it's working correctly.
Super. Brilliant. Now, duplicate content. We had a problem where we had 2 articles that were everything you need to know about a knowledge panel. And that was because I wrote one years ago and the person who wrote the new one didn't know I'd written it. And we ended up with 2 articles and it was huge confusion, and we've just merged them, as you said, taken the best bits out of my old article, added to the new article, redirected, kept the old URL. That sounds like it's going to work, I hope.
So there are a few things. I think last week there was a quote from someone from Google. I don't remember. I think it was as part of Google Office Hours, where Google advised that if you see indented URLs in search results, it means that probably you may want to merge them because they are similar. And actually, in the case of some cannibalization issues, this is what I also noticed. So, but there are also cases where it is actually a good thing because you are simply getting more real estate. So it is for you to decide. But if, for example, you are on number 7, number 8, and you cannot get to number 1, maybe it is a sign you should merge them. And maybe it will elevate you to the top because all the authority signals, everything will be merged into one. But when merging, make sure that you are merging to the one which has more authority, more links, because like if a link goes through a redirect, it always like loses some percentage of juice.
Yeah, I thought Google was saying a year or so ago that they now don't lose juice on the 301 redirect, but that might be me misinterpreting what was said.
I think they said that, but
you don't believe
again,
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I was talking to Sarah Mokanseye earlier on, and one of the comments was, always take what Google say with a pinch of salt. They've got a hidden agenda, which is their own benefit.
Yeah, totally,
and as you said earlier on, the Core Web Vitals was all about them saving money.
Yeah, it's an awesome, like it's like Google Search Central, for example. This is an awesome blog where you can learn a ton Google documentation, but always I advise testing some ideas for yourself and kind of drawing your own conclusions.
Yeah, don't take what Google say at face value.
Yeah.
Now, internal linking, I'm really interested in this because we went through a whole process of doing the internal linking manually.
Oh, and how did it go?
Oh, it went very well. We got lots of extra traffic. We boosted our rankings, and the person who did it now understands absolutely everything about brand SERPs knowledge panels. That's Jean Marie, and she now also has a map of the entire websites at Kalicube in her head. So it was a huge amount of effort. She now has an entire map of the websites in her head, but was it the most effective way to do that?
I would say that depends. If this is a relatively, if it is a relatively small site, like a couple of hundreds, up to a couple of hundreds pages, it may be worth doing it manually because you will, as you said, you will have this clear map of the site, what connects to what in your head, and it will immensely help you down the road. In the case of my site, I also like planned it out. If I, for example, build a new site or rebuild a site for my client, if they are relatively small, I also do it manually. I map keywords, I try to silo them. But of course, it is not always the fastest and the most efficient way. And if you have an already working site which has a couple of thousand URLs, the first thing to do is to make sure that anchor text is okay. To crawl the site, make sure, check if there are, for example, orphans URLs, because very often in the case of e-commerce, there will be product pages that have 0 or 1 link. And if these are important products, you have to make sure that they have more links. And there is a very nice solution in links, which can help you automate the entire process. Are you using InLinks by Dixon Jones?
No, I don't, but I've heard very good things about it for the internal linking.
So this is something I have been also using on some sites where I don't have time to do it manually. And it really saves a lot of time and adds those contextual links. But you have to be sure that you choose the correct entities, because it makes those links through entities. And if you mix it up, then you will have a lot of irrelevant links. But generally, links have to be internal links. You don't want to no-follow them. They have to have anchor tags that make sense. And usually every page on the site should be reachable within like 3 clicks at most. You don't want to like have 10 levels for a page to be reached. In a nutshell.
Nice, really, really simple rules that I love. Really simple sets of rules that we can all follow. So we've actually got 4 questions left, and we can take the next 10 minutes to answer them. What strategies can we employ to improve the crawlability and indexability of our site?
So regarding crawlability, this is again a bit similar to what we talked before. You want to make sure that you don't have 404 pages. If you have tons of 404s, then you will be wasting your crawl budget. The same with server errors. If your server is like, if you're using some cheap hosting, you may start getting 500 errors. And this will again kind of negatively impact your crawl budget or waste it, depending on the size. of the page. Of course, there is crawl stats report in Google Search Console. And this is a great tool to give you like the sample of how Google is crawling your site. If there are any like critical issues, like for example, DNS resolution or robots.txt is not available or is returning like 500, those kind of fundamental crawlability things, you will be alerted of that. You will see that. So these are I would say the basic things.
So in fact, for the crawlability aspect, it comes back to the first three things we talked about, is discoverability, selectability, and crawlability. And then I would assume the indexability of it would be on rendering and indexing.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, how lovely.
Yeah, and adding to indexability as well, what we talked about, the quality, right? The quality, this is something that becomes very, very important here.
Yeah, and the structure of the page, the clarity of what you're writing, using your headings correctly is a really simple way that isn't very geeky, not technical at all, is using an H1, then lots of H2s with potentially some H3s, and not starting your page with an H4 or going straight from an H4 to an H1, to an H4, which I've seen a lot, and I've even done it, I can shamefully say.
And one more thing, I have recorded a separate video on that. Many of the sites I saw that have problems with indexing, in addition to having like issues with quality, they are not done in the way that Google kind of understands, and not created in the way Google understands pages, which means that if you have a page, you should think about this page as one topic, one keyword. I'm just keyword, maybe that's not the best term, but keyword, topic, entity, one topic, one keyword per page. You shouldn't be like writing about everything on every page, because then you won't be ranking for nothing, and you may not even get indexed. One case I saw, there was again a lawyer site, and they wanted to rank for like a few top lawyer terms, like personal injury lawyer, something. And they had like service pages, they had blog, and every blog post was about some topic which wasn't selected based on keyword research. It was simply selected because like a person who was writing thought maybe we should write about this, and every blog post was optimized for this one keyword, personal injury lawyer, every blog post. And as a result, the site like ranked for nothing. So that's a fundamental, that's a huge example of how this fundamental SEO rule can be broken, and the results can be like horrible.
Right, yeah, and Fabrice Canal once again pointed out something really, really interesting to me about discovering, selecting, crawling, rendering, and indexing, is that the bots are now completely machine learning driven. And so the more it sees something, the easier it is for it to discover, select, crawl, index, and render.
Totally.
And so, for example, using WordPress is in and of itself an advantage, because Google and Bing see WordPress so often. Using some strange theme in the middle of WordPress is going to create a problem. So the closer you stick to the core of WordPress, the better you're going to perform, in the sense that it sees it so often. And interesting enough, something like Wix, which is very famous, is used an awful lot. So that's another advantage potentially. Duda is used much more than we think it is, because GoDaddy's sites are run in parts of the world on Duda. So Duda is actually more popular and more prevalent than we think. And if you're going to build your own bespoke website, entire bespoke system, you're immediately putting yourself at a disadvantage from that perspective, is the machine won't be able to understand your site out of the box.
Yeah, totally. Couldn't agree more.
Isn't that fun? Okay, so now we're going to talk about the migrations without losing traffic. I've done literally over 100 migrations while I was desperately trying to make money to pay for Kalicube when it wasn't making money. And that was one of the main things I did with site migrations, because I found them to be relatively easy and very well paid.
Yeah, totally. I love website migrations as well. And so far, I haven't had one that was unsuccessful, the one that I was like guiding fully.
Brilliant.
So,
So just for anybody watching who's thinking, oh, I need a site migration, who should I ask? Ask Olga, because Kalicube now makes money, so I don't do them anymore.
okay, cool. I can migrate your site. I'll be happy to do that.
Super. So, and what are the strategies that you use?
I have created a very, very long post about this, like 600 words. So we may link to that if someone wants more details. But generally, you want to be sure 100% that you actually reflect every important page in your new page, new domain, new system, depending on what type of migration it is. And by an important page, I mean the pages that, of course, get organic traffic, the pages that have rankings. Sometimes they are like the same, sometimes they're different. Pages that have links. And if you are removing some pages, I wouldn't recommend, for example, redirecting them to the home page, but redirecting them to the closest possible page. This may even help those closest page rank better. But if you are doing that to the homepage, in most cases, it won't help you in any way. And of course, redirects. Make sure that they are implemented correctly. Test them before, after, right after. Test them 100 times, because sometimes things may go wrong. Redirects may not work correctly, especially if you, for example, implement redirects using htaccess because you have a huge site and you don't want to like manually add those redirects in WordPress. Then just test. And even if you make a mistake, even if something happens, if you catch it very soon, Google won't notice and it won't impact you negatively.
Right. So the day after the migration, or the day of the
and
migration,
migrate over the weekend.
You solve all the problems straight away. Migrate over the weekend. You do it on a Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday night usually. Yeah.
Oh, right. Why is that?
Because if something breaks, if the site somehow is not working on Sunday, fewer people will notice than if the site wasn't working on Monday or Tuesday.
Unless it's a site about what to do at weekends.
Yeah, totally.
In which case, it's the other way around. Do it on a Wednesday.
Yeah, totally. Totally, depending on the traffic trends of the site.
Brilliant. Sorry, I couldn't help but say that.
Totally. Great point.
So how does Google handle 302 redirects rather than 301s? I mean, 302 is temporary, 301 is permanent. How much does Google care?
So generally, 301 tells Google that we want the target to be indexed. 302 says that we want you to keep the page that is redirected and don't index the target.
Oh, right. That's a lovely way of putting it.
Yeah, but if you keep 302s for a very long time, Google will start treating them as 301s. It is very often, I'm not sure where it's coming from, but very often when I work with developers, they like to put 302s instead of 301s. And I'm not sure why, but a lot of developers do that. So if you do that and do only that, and you keep those redirects for a very long time, it won't be a problem. And Google recently said, I think there was even an interesting article on Ahrefs where Patrick Stokes ran a test comparing what happens if you keep the redirect after a year or remove it. I haven't finished reading this one, but generally, if you remove that redirect after a year, Google should be okay. But users, there may be still users who are visiting from other sources. There may be links. So if you can, keep them.
Right. Yeah. And Fabrice Canel, once again, because I talked to him more than is perhaps reasonable for him, because I must be wasting so much of his time, pointed out to me that if a page still has an internal link, Bingbot at least might well select it and crawl it.
Yeah.
And therefore the 301 redirects needs to stay in place. So he was saying, keep your 301s unless there are no incoming links.
Yeah, totally.
Which I like as an idea anyway. So we've pretty much got all the way through this. Yeah. Last question is, how does Google treat subdomains and subdirectories, and what is their impact in SEO? That's a huge question for the last one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So I will try to talk about this briefly. Generally, you have to be aware that a subdomain is for Google a new site, a separate site.
Mhm.
With a subdirectory, this is like the same site. And there may be different reasons for you using either this one or that one. For example, people often are thinking whether they should have a blog in a subdirectory or a subdomain.
Mhm.
In most cases, I recommend having it in subfolder because you will automatically, through those blog posts, you will be getting links, you will be getting authority to your main domain. And if this is an e-commerce site, usually it is a good idea to make it have links, because product pages usually don't get many links. So it is a valid point in that respect. But there are also cases where you prefer to have a subdomain if you want to make the site separate and make it, for example, put it on a different CMS. There is also you can also do that regarding language division. You may have a different domain entirely. You can have a subdirectory. You can have subdomain. In most cases, I recommend having a separate domain or a subdomain, because then you will have like six different websites which are independent on one another, and if something happens to one of them, the rest should be fine. So
Okay.
this is where I would recommend having that, and you won't have problems like Google showing the incorrect language version to users in a specific area. If you have them separate, that problem won't be there. So in a nutshell, that's my take on it.
That's a really interesting point, and I'll end this with Trustpilot. I worked with Trustpilot a lot a few years ago, and they actually switched from subfolders to subdomains, and it was a huge win for them by separating the countries using subdomains. That wasn't the only change they made, but when they made that change, they implemented other improvements, but it was a huge, huge win for them. They were very smart when they did that. I'm not saying everybody should do that.
Yeah,
I'm saying
of
it works
course.
once for Trustpilot.
Of course.
Anyway, thank you so much, Olga. We've gone through 22
Yeah.
super interesting, geeky, techie questions. I generally don't do this because I'm focused on brand and branded searches and entities and schema markup, but I've just learned a lot, and I've done my refresher course of an hour with Olga on technical SEO that I have completely left to one side for the last 7 or 8 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a huge pleasure. It was also a nice refresher for me. So I hope we can get this done again in the future.
Yeah.
And thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Thank you.
A quick goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Olga.
Thanks a ton.
Brilliant. Kalicube. It's all about your brand SERP.